Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Levler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else.
So my guest this morning is Assemblyman Joe DeStefano, probably one of our longest-running guests. Joe, I thank you. I know how hectic your schedule has been and always is, so thanks again for carving time out to see us.
Well, good morning, Dan. It's always a pleasure to be with you and talking about the things that are important to us, and I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have today.
Sure. Well, again, let's start out for anyone who hasn't heard the other 6 appearances you've been on. A little bit about your history, how you got involved in labor, how you got involved in the fire service, and how you got to where you are now.
Well, I became a public safety dispatcher back in 1991, working for the police department. After a few years doing that, I actually switched out to the sheriff's department, where I spent the rest of my career and retired as a supervisor in 2018. As far as the fire service goes, I started that when I was 19 years old, and I've been there ever since with the Medford Fire Department. Currently serve as a commissioner for the last 27 years. And how I got into politics was I felt like I needed to do more. I wasn't doing enough. I was also a union president for the Sheriff Probation Unit for a number of years, serving on a numerous amount of committees that you and I both know about.
Yes.
And I actually got the bug to want to do more for my community and expand my community background from just the Medford area to throughout the 3rd Assembly District, which is where I still serve.
Sure. And, you have a lifetime of experience that pointed you towards what it is you do now, right?
Right.
This is not a thing that everybody can just wake up one day and say, you know what, I want to represent an entire district.
Yeah.
As a fire commissioner, as a union representative, a delegate at our conventions, everything else. I mean, these conversations, these big level, multifaceted discussions with the stakeholders on both sides with excellent points and trying to get to the right answer, like this is something you've been doing for decades.
Right. And again, when I joined, when I became a union president, it was all about advocacy. I believe that there's the voice of the voiceless. I believe that things need to be streamlined. A lot of people that we represent in the union had a lot of great ideas. It was just the proper way of getting it to where it needed to go, funneling it to the top, which is what I did.
Right. So, just getting in on the fire service a little bit more, your years of experience and you've seen folks come in and out of the fire service. And right now what we have is a situation where there's great need and maybe not a ton of people being aware or even able to. Maybe they want to give to their community, but they're not able to. And it was something that you had been discussing for a little bit. Now I know you have a bill in place, it's Assembly Bill 9689. Senate has a companion bill, that's Senate Bill 8692, to try and do something to help folks kind of get involved in volunteer fire service. Again, it's not a paid job. You've got to go on your own time. You've got to train on your own time. When there's an emergency and dangerous things are happening and people need your help, you're going on your own time to do that. So looking at a way to kind of help folks that get involved in this thing and do it on a volunteer basis. You had this idea, and I'll let you speak to what your bill says and what it means.
Okay, well, basically the reason why it was presented, something I've been thinking about for a long time and something that the fire service has struggled with for a number of years is recruitment and retention. That is the biggest issue today facing the fire service. Fire and EMS, I'm not going to, they're included as well because they are the bulk of the calls that we all go on. And I guess we'll talk about the cost recovery bill in a few minutes.
Sure, yeah.
But the thing of it is that to get people enticed to want to do things and helpful to their community, I believe that we needed to create an incentive for those who work in governmental jobs, that there's a way of paying back a little bit and to maybe entice people to join civil service and to get involved with pensions and things of that nature, is to do something about recruitment and retention. And that was to introduce this retirement bill, which basically is similar to the military buyback, which for every 5 years of service you give to your fire or EMS agency, you would get 1 pension credit, up to a total of 3 years for a maximum of 15 years of service. It's not a lot. There are a lot of implications as far as financially. There is some cost to both the state, the entity, and the retirement system. It's comprehensive, but it's something that's very doable. And again, the volunteer fire and EMS services save the taxpayers who are covered by those areas a lot of money. There's plenty of discussion, and we can talk about why and who and what. But the bottom line is, right now we have to provide for what's in place, and this is what my incentive was to bring to the state. And it just got introduced, so we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, and you find there is this parallel, I think, in fire service and civil service jobs in general. There is a core altruism there, right? There is that knowledge that someone could go out and do all sorts of things with their life, with their time, and instead they seek out and deliberately put themselves in situations where they can help others.
Right.
So it should be no surprise to you, and I know you're already aware, a lot of AME members volunteer.
Right.
And in that same way, there are other folks inside of civil service positions that also volunteer in the fire service. And it speaks to the character, right? I can spend my time however I want. I would like to spend my time in my life helping other people. And this bill goes to, offer a small incentive to get somebody in the door in the first place, somebody that was already feeling that way and wondering, how can I do this and make this make sense for my family? It would mean 15 years of service towards volunteerism that would ultimately net them 3 years of retirement buyback.
Well, obviously, we need to do something.
Sure.
Otherwise, the volunteer fire and EMS services are going to fall by the wayside if we don't try and entice more people. And when I joined, when I was 19 years old, I was getting ready to go to college. And times back then were much different than they are today. We have 2 family incomes. We have husbands and wives working both, 2 jobs.
Sure.
So it's harder to entice and incentivize people. So if you put like a financial impact to their retirement years where they'll be together forever and get some kind of a financial help throughout their golden years, if you will.
Sure.
That's a way of paying them back for all of their service when they gave to their community when they were younger.
Sure. And there are folks that approach life with the idea of what can I get right now? And there are folks that say, I want to build right now. So at the end, I have, this comfort. And again, that's at the heart of the mentality in a civil servant. And for a recruitment and retention tool, I think it's an excellent idea. I know, you've had discussions with many folks, and I guess I just want to get your sense. It's something obviously I believe in. I know it's something that you believe in. But what do you get the sense of out in the world? Do you think people see it, they get it, they understand?
Yeah, I think that there's certain people, like I've gotten many calls already from both sides of the aisle that wanted to sign on to this bill. And they feel that volunteerism is a very meritorious kind of a thing to do. And I think if you had to put a number on it, which is impossible to do because you don't know how many people it really affects and how many people would actually take advantage of it, because there is a financial impact on the person as well.
Right.
But the bottom line is people do believe in volunteerism. We need to just bring it more to the forefront and say, okay, we need you to come and join us. We need help. And it's very rewarding for people to feel that way. And I think my colleagues feel the same way. There's not really a bill in Albany that doesn't get a lot of bipartisan support when it comes to the volunteer system.
Sure. And, so we're here in Suffolk County, Nassau County, I think very similarly, families that have moved from city areas and they come out here to the island. And what they're accustomed to is a paid fire service, right? Everybody, It's their job. They get paid. That's their salary. They do all of this stuff. But out on the island, it's volunteerism, right? There's no paycheck involved. And because of that, not everybody understands the huge savings that's involved here in having a volunteer system. If the volunteer system can't be sustained, you can't say we're no longer, we'll go back to like local bucket brigades. It's not going to work.
No.
So then the alternative is actually, I believe, way more expensive than something designed to be,
neighbor helping neighbor.
Right.
That's
right.
That's really what it boils down to. Again, so a challenge every day. There's a lot of mutual aid going on, during the day when people are mostly working. Some departments get together and they put a couple of trucks on the road and, they mix and match crews just to get the calls answered. And we need to fix that. We truly need to fix that.
Sure. And, when you talk about mutual aid, different groups of folks have different dynamics. And when you kind of smash them all together, it just adds to all of what's going on. If you train with a group of 10 guys and everybody's got their routine down, you get a call, you go out with those 10 guys, everybody knows what they're doing. Right. You get together with 7 other people that you haven't ever worked with, and there's that additional element of stress. So it's a worthy point. And I think that this bill is something that needs consideration. The conversations need to happen. And I think it's a good first step, right? Yeah. I don't think it fixes all the problems with volunteerism, but it is, I think it's a good first step.
Over the last 3.5 years, Dan, if I may.
Sure.
The one thing I've learned about Albany, the 3.5 years that I've been there, is that education is what really needs to happen.
Sure.
People that are not in the know about certain issues, it's very easy to explain a topic to someone who wants to learn about it. And when you educate other colleagues about certain issues, they say, "Wow, I never thought of that," or that's a great idea. And I think when we educate our colleagues about the things that are important, especially to those on the island, I would say that the legislators that are on Long Island, Nassau, Suffolk, they get it, because this is where we live and this is who we represent.
Right.
It's a matter of educating the rest of the state on the things that are important to Long Islanders as well.
Sure. And there's folks, there's big patches of upstate New York that also has volunteerism on fire service and EMS. But then you have this big cluster, this huge mass of people that have only dealt with paid fire service. So educating, upstate and educating on the island is one thing. Different message needed in the city to get people to understand and to get your colleagues on either side of the aisle to get together and back something like this. So, just keeping on first responders for the moment and talking about what that all is. As you know, we worked on a bill a number of years ago, cooked up this great idea, and eventually, there was shuffling of papers and different people getting involved, and ultimately, who got their name on the paper first, that had to change and whatever else. But it was, one, it was a great idea. Two, I really appreciate you taking the time and talking through like our concerns on this issue. And what I'm talking about is recognizing folks in call centers, emergency call centers across the state, not just our members, but anyone anywhere in the state of New York, finally being recognized as first responders. So one, thank you for getting involved in that. And two, it had to be a proud moment for you to see that signed into law last year.
Well, yes, it's a fact that, the way the wheels of Albany turn, I had to introduce it and then eventually give it away, which I had no problem whatsoever doing, because with me, it's not about my ego. It's about getting things done for the people that I represent. Working in that field for as long as I did, over 27 years, I knew what the job entailed. I knew what it needed to be done to recognize those people who perform those jobs as first responders. When people call 911, they are talking to somebody who are actually helping them through their emergency at that time.
Sure.
Until boots on the ground get there. We've talked about this on the show, delivering babies, car accidents,
yes.
Mothers and fathers on the ground with their child on the phone, where the dispatcher is talking to them how to wake mommy up or wake daddy up,
right,
and things like that. What better way to recognize those people by recognizing them as first responders? Because in reality, they are your first line of defense when it comes to who's going to be there to help that person through that emergency or that situation that they're involved in.
Sure.
And, I was proud to be the one to introduce it.
Yep.
And I'm proud that, it got done. Again, it didn't matter to me whose name was on it as the first person, but everybody knows that it came from me, which is fine. And if I get a pat on the back for it, that's great. But I didn't need it. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew how I wanted to carry it out.
Yeah.
And I looked for help, and I got the help, and now it's law today.
Hey, Joe, that's why we love working with you. And this is what I think people expect from their elected representatives. It wasn't about you. It was about the thing that needed to get done, and you found the best path. And the best path meant you had to step out of the limelight for a second, let somebody else come in and allow them to work the process just for it to get to where it needed to be. I believe that's when we elect folks, that's what we expect of them. If you decided, no, this is my baby, this is my thing, I worked this industry for however many years, I need to have it done this way and whatever, it wouldn't have happened.
Correct.
You know, everyone in this line of work across the state of New York owes you a debt of gratitude for putting ego aside and focusing on what mattered in the first place, which was getting the thing done.
And I think that's what matters to most people, Dan. I think that, you know, when you go out knocking on doors, you know, hoping to get reelected, they actually, what are you doing? You know, how do I support you? What do you do? And things like that. And you know, one of the things I talk about is working, you know, bipartisanly to get things done. I mean, people don't want to hear that you're a Republican or a Democrat or this or that. They want to know, what are you doing? What are you getting done? What, you know, tell me what you represent. They don't want to hear that I'm a Republican and I fight the Republican red. And it's none of that. It's about bipartisanship, getting stuff done, making relationships where you know you can work with the other side. And that's what I think that I do best. Is I'm able to work with both sides.
I'm just going to throw this in there. There are tons of complicated issues, tons of stakeholders, tons of different ways to look at things on any given issue. But most specifically, there was a piece of legislation that was, let's call it cannabis adjacent, right? It wasn't about cannabis itself. It was about workers and how if this thing is now law and it's going to happen, how do we deal with the workers that are producing this product? What safety measures are in place? How are they going to be treated fairly? Everything else. And a number of people very, very anti, you know, on the cannabis issue itself, understood, even if I'm anti-cannabis, I've got to step out and I've got to be there for the workers because this job's going to happen one way or the other. And so I can have my feelings on the issue, but I'm there for workers. And I know that you and a number of your colleagues stood together and made sure that the vote passed to protect workers in this industry. I want to thank you for that.
No problem. And I guess what you're referring to is the Farm Bill about cultivating the marijuana. Yes, I am against it. Legalization, I voted against every single measure of that. But when this bill came before me, it was basically saying this is workers. It's a worker bill. It's not a marijuana issue. Marijuana is going to be here, regardless of what I think personally or how I feel about it. It doesn't matter. But in that particular bill, it was about cultivating it, and I thought that at that point my vote was better served by protecting the workers that it's going to actually help. And that's the labor issue that I have, is that I wanted to make sure that labor was presented the right way and represented.
And you know what? People don't always understand. You know, on a polarizing issue like that, they want to hear, hey, listen, I voted no every step of the way, or I voted yes every step of the way, or whatever. But these issues sometimes become more complicated, and to have the presence of mind to look at the bill that way, not just see the word cannabis and then react to it, and find out what the heart of the bill meant and what it really meant to impact people's lives. It's a credit to you, your colleagues, and all the folks that voted for that, because ultimately it protects working people, and that's something you've brought with you throughout your life, regardless of what issues may be in front of the Assembly in general, and regardless of positions that the Republicans may take on a particular issue as a party member, your focus is going to be on human beings, their lives, and protecting them at work.
Right. And my philosophy in Albany has been, as you know, we talk about it a lot, is that, I never vote a particular way. I vote the way the people back home would expect me to vote because they are the reason why I'm there.
Sure.
And that I live with that saying every single day.
So moving on to another piece of legislation, the EMS Cost Recovery Act. And basically that was something we got involved in last summer. And we got involved because of the number of folks that we were talking to that were AME members and other folks in the fire service and just learning about what this issue meant. And honestly, the big thing that stood out for me is the fact that this stuff was already being paid for through insurance, and insurance companies were holding on to this money and it was ultimately costing the taxpayers.
Right.
So I got involved to have the conversations with folks that were surprised that I was getting involved because, in their head, they're like, well, you're not really a stakeholder. And I said, well, some of my members are affected by this because they're in this service, but all of my members are taxpayers.
Well,
and this affects all taxpayers.
Ultimately, the taxpayer is the one who fits the bill for fire and EMS.
Yeah.
EMS, we were the only state in the country that didn't allow for ambulance billing through a fire department. And what that does basically is, with the costs going up of everything, ultimately the costs have to be passed on to the taxpayers to fit the bill for getting those services that they expect to be provided.
Sure.
Insurance companies, for the longest time, I've known about this bill for the last 15 or 20 years.
Right.
It's probably been longer, but let's say the last 15 years for sure, that there was a lot of pushback about it. And no one really understood why. It's a common sense issue. You pay for the premiums for the insurance companies, and it's already provided in your coverage,
right.
But you're not allowed to recoup the money if you're a fire department because you're subsidized through taxpayers' money.
Right.
This would be an opportunity to maybe get some relief for those taxpayers who say, okay, we'll use $200,000 as an average. Over the next couple of years, we can bill for $200,000 worth of services that we are not normally able to bill for.
Sure.
Now, think about that in the budget perspective. Like if you're at a $2 million budget and you have $200,000 you recoup, theoretically, you can reduce your budget by the $200,000 that you're now receiving from the insurance company that you were no longer allowed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like the premise behind it. It was really having the taxpayers in mind about trying to alleviate some of the stress on them, knowing the high cost of living that we have here, to say, hey, we're the only state that don't do it. We don't understand why we don't do it, and that's why the fight has been there for as long as it has been.
Sure.
Because of that.
Sure.
So the reality is we're trying to help reduce the cost to the taxpayers who actually provide the funds for the services that the ambulance and fire departments provide.
Yeah, and reducing the cost of the taxpayer is an aspect, right, and a very important one, but it also increases resources, better equipment, better training. So now, for less money, you get better service.
Right.
For something you've been paying for all along anyway through your insurance company.
And the best news for those who are not in agreement with that bill, there is an opt-out. You do not have to do it.
Right.
If my fire department, which currently does not provide ambulance service, if I decided, hey, it's going to help it's going to hurt my fund drive or things like that, they can opt out and say, we're not interested in doing it, and you don't have to. So
Right.
that's the good news about that. A lot of people were saying, am I going to get a bill if my fire department sends an ambulance, and am I going to get a bill? The answer is no. It's soft billing. They're going to bill the insurance company that you have, and if they don't get paid on it or whatever the insurance company pays, that's what they're going to take. They're not going to send you a bill and say, they only paid $500, you need to pay me $2 more.
Right.
It doesn't happen that way.
Right. This is literally designed to hold accountable, the deep pockets, money that's been collected for years now. Again, we're talking more than a decade of this money being collected by insurance companies and then never paid out back to the fire service that provided these services. And again, the taxpayer needs to have the confidence that the service is going to be there and it's going to be top quality. So this also helps with that as well.
Correct.
So.
Training. We always talk about training. These are opportunities for training, better equipment, as you said, and possibly even recruitment. And say, hey, I don't want to go on an ambulance that doesn't have the equipment I need to do the job.
Sure.
So
right.
Those are the things that as a commissioner who used to be a riding ambulance member, I can absolutely see all of it.
Yeah. And now you're reducing liability back to the taxpayer and the fire district as well. So all around, I think it was a great concept. It was great to see that got passed through with the budget. I think it's an important thing, and it's good to know as a taxpayer, as a resident in the state of New York, to know that these conversations are being had by elected officials to figure out ways like relief is coming. Things are going to get a little bit better. And I mean, think about the last few years, all the health crisis stuff that we were dealing with, economic uncertainty and everything else. These conversations are important because they are part of the larger fix.
Right.
So.
And, like I said, we've come a long way. We still got a lot more work to do, as you and I both know. But again, I'm up for re-election this year, so hopefully I get reelected and I can continue my service for another 2 more years.
Absolutely.
Working in Albany.
Yeah.
And
we look forward to that. And then you can complain that when I complain to you the next time I'm in Albany and you complain that you're in Albany, then we can both say we did it to ourselves.
Yes.
Right?
I love what I do, Dan.
Yes.
It is what it is.
So, speaking of Albany and all that goes on up there, and listen, I know I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek about being up in Albany. It's a trek, obviously. It's a lot of work. It's long hours, a lot of difficult conversations, and if you're up there and doing this work, you have jokes like these. But the fact of the matter is, we love what we do, and we do this on purpose. But just in reference to I guess the craziness of, like, let's say the past month, the 2022 budget, what were the key priorities that you saw included in there that
Well, there were a number of issues, good and bad, if you want to play both ends of this. Obviously, the cost of the budget is a lot more than, of course, we would like to have saw. But the good points that you referenced to is more money for education. We had a number of $1 million more put in, $457 million put more into education. And as I spoke on this show many times, we have to educate our kids. They're our future. So wherever that needs to go, we need to make sure that we have enough money for the schools to do the jobs that they do. It's a funding for the highways. We were talking about that earlier today. It's like, coming in from where I live, I felt like I was on Crater City. And now with the millions of dollars that is being provided through the budget, I think that's a great thing for us, especially on Long Island. My office is always inundated with people who say, I lost a tire, I lost a rim, my front end, whatever the issues are, we need to address it. We can't kick that can down the road any longer. That has to get done. I've been assured by the powers to be, in construction and things, that we're going to get on that real soon, like this week or next week or relatively shortly.
Sure.
Because it needs to be done. I guess as soon as the weather gets more, into the warm season,
yes,
we're going to be able to do that. Some of the downside, obviously, is the amount of the budget. It's more than almost like Texas and Florida put together. But more, think about it. If you're a Buffalo Bills fan, you're happy as a clam today because you're going to get a new stadium, and the taxpayers are going to pay for it. That always troubles me when someone threatens to do something. I always like to call their bluff. Go ahead.
Right.
No big deal.
Right.
If you feel the grass is greener somewhere else, have at it.
Mm-hmm.
That's concerning because a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, not just our side, both sides of the aisle were not happy with that.
Sure.
When we know that the owner of that team has the money or the resources to provide, and the bottom line for us as taxpayers is that we don't really reap any of those benefits that are coming out of that bill. The same. The only thing I can see from a labor standpoint, and that's what we're focusing on, is it's going to create jobs. There's no doubt in my mind that that's going to create and permanent jobs and things like that. Sure. That's the good side. The bad side is obviously it could have been funded a different way, not just through taxpayers' dollars.
Right, and those jobs would have been created anyway.
Correct.
Right, and at the end of the day, is it really in the taxpayers' best interest to fund something like this when we have hundreds of lane miles of road that needs to be fixed, and there are other big issues? So I understand the pushback on that.
Yes,
for sure, and it's going to be a complicated year. You talk about your election. Well, there's a lot of elections up in the air, and there are folks that everybody thought was definitely going to be running for office that aren't running for office, and then other offices where you thought you'd never see a primary ever, and now there's primaries happening, and so it's going to be an interesting year to see how this stuff shakes out. And I hate to say it, but something like this stadium, it's part of the conversation.
We got races from governor primaries all the way down to assembly members. So it's a lot to do. Again, will last year continue? That's a good question. I do think that a lot of people are concerned about the state of the state, the state of the country, the state of the towns that they live in. So I think everybody needs to focus on what's in their best interest this year. I think that you got to vote for people that have your best interest at heart and that are going to do the right thing by you. And if you believe what's going on, then you stay with the person you're with. If you think that you need a change, then of course, then you vote the other way.
Sure.
Some people like myself who have a 4-year record now. Now I'm going to run on my record. People who want to be, assembly members, senators, whatever. Now they have to show what they want to do to get elected.
Sure.
I have a track history now, so now people can vote on me based on.
And it's always interesting when you have a challenger and they're out making promises, but they can't show that they've delivered anything, right? It's almost easier to run against somebody that's entrenched because you can criticize the things that they've done and then promise to do all sorts of things that you may or may not be able to deliver on. So it is challenging. I think it's going to be a very noisy year politically, right? You know, when we have the stuff happening on the national level, it just raises the volume of everything going on, and people are going to get maybe a little exhausted with all the ads they're going to see.
Paper,
From
the mailers they're going to get, the mailers they're going to get.
the whole nine. Yeah. So an interesting year politically.
And especially on the top of the ticket where you have both sides, both probably have primaries,
right.
You know, so it's going to start right from the top and work its way down.
Sure. So just lastly, quickly, are there any legislative priorities that we need to know about that you're working on?
Well, obviously the incentive for firefighters and EMS, that's the one I'm going to be working on very hard. And the other one that we touched on it with the marijuana issue, but getting back into the first responder field is that I do have a bill, and Alexis Wyke, Senator Wyke, has the companion bill, or I have her companion bill, whichever way you work it.
Yeah.
Where when people expect fire and EMS to show up at your house, they expect them to be in a coherent, non-intoxicated, non-under the influence kind of way. We have a bill that's presently out there that's going to say that when you're working on behalf of the fire department or an ambulance, you cannot be under the influence of those particular drugs.
Sure.
With that drug.
Sure.
We should never be under the influence at all times.
Yep.
But right now, with no direction as far as how it affects fire and EMS, that's a bill that, I know my bill number is A9292. I don't know what Alexis is.
Sure.
But in any case, it's one of those things where it's important to me because I am the guy who kind of represents the fire and EMS world. And people look to me and they make some suggestions. And that was a suggestion that was made. It's like, listen, as commissioners, there's a ton of liability out there for people that are performing their job as a volunteer being under the influence of either drugs or alcohol. With alcohol, we know there's a mechanism to test for that. With drugs, we really don't have that mechanism.
It tests exposure, not impairment.
Correct.
And that's complicated, and that's a complicated issue for us as well. There's a lot to discuss there, but the fact of the matter is, what we know is that on-the-job injuries, when someone's under the influence of anything, right, they're impaired. Over 60% of the people that end up becoming injured because someone being impaired, it's not the person that was impaired. It's somebody else. Right. This is a safety issue, I think, for the public. I think it's a safety issue for workers, and I think it's a good initiative.
Right. And like I said, again, it's got some legs because people believe that their public safety is at risk when people respond and they shouldn't be.
Sure.
And so it's going to be it's a challenge just like anything else. Because you're going to have pushback. The problem is that, it's something where, you're talking about people going into people's houses. You're talking about people responding and maybe shouldn't be responding. I mean, we do have mechanisms for alcohol. We don't have mechanisms for marijuana.
And these are they're life-threatening jobs for the public and also for the people responding. So it's an excellent point. And Joe, I want to thank you again. Like I said, our longest-running guest, but always great to have you on the show, and I appreciate you carving out time to come down. We wish you the best of luck this year. You've done an excellent job representing your members. You've done an excellent job of bringing forward issues that deal with the fire service specifically and protecting the taxpayer. But additionally, you've been an excellent voice for labor, and I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be here, and I'll continue to come as long as you invite me.
And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week.